Hello and welcome to LFC Focus. Liverpool have just beaten Newcastle United by 2-0 at Anfield, putting them back up to second in the Premier League table. Once again, a lovely performance and a lovely win in the race for those Champions League spots come the end of the season. And it was a game that just kind of went pretty much as we'd expected, you know, for all the narrative before the game about it being attack versus defence, you know, it kind of ended up being like that. But I think there was so much talk during the game, and those of you who watch BT Sport in the UK must agree with me on this, about how Liverpool were being frustrated. You know, it only took them about 10 minutes into the match before all the commentators could talk about was the fact that Liverpool were struggling to create chances. You know, their front three wasn't clicking. It seemed like they were having huge issues going forward if you were basing it on what the commentary was giving you. But I mean, that's what you expected from the game. That was what Newcastle set up to do. And anyone who's watched Liverpool so far this season will know that when teams do go for that low block against us, we don't sort of over-press ourselves in the first half. We don't overdo it. We don't try too hard to break that down, because the problem with what happens when you do that is that you use up too much energy, and by the time the game comes to its end, if you haven't broken them down by then, you just haven't got anything left in the tank to do it later on in the match. And it also means that obviously your players get knackered and you struggle to defend, and you can even end up losing the game because of that. So, I mean, it was no surprise how the game was going. And I mean, it's testament to what Jurgen Klopp said when he first arrived at the club. You know, he wanted Liverpool fans to turn from doubters into believers. And maybe a few seasons ago, if a game had gone like that for the first 40 minutes or so, if Liverpool had struggled to create chances, like I guess you could say they did for most of that first half, then maybe we would have been doubting. We would have been nervous. We would have been dissenting. We would have been upset with the way that Liverpool were performing in the game. But at no point during that first 40 minutes did I really think, okay, this game, we're in trouble here. We're not going to score. We are not going to win here. All the way through, I was thinking, no, Liverpool know what to do here. Liverpool have been in that situation before. Liverpool have shown so far, so many times this season, that they know how to deal with this situation. And once again, they just did it perfectly, you know. And I mean, credit to Newcastle for the way they played early on in the game, you know. They pressed incredibly well. And while, again, on BT Sport, they talked a fair bit towards the end of the game about how they thought the Newcastle defenders had a good game. For me, personally, it was actually their players further up the pitch that were actually stopping Liverpool from creating too many chances early on in the game. You know, it was the forwards and the attacking midfielders that were pressing so incredibly well. And I mean, the amount of times that Van Dijk, Lovren and even Loris Karius got on the ball early on in that game, and it was never for want of trying from Liverpool. It was never because, you know, our players weren't looking to create and they were just playing the safe pass. They were sending it back to the goalie. They were scared to try and create anything on the ball. It was simply because Newcastle were actually pressing so well. They were harrying our defenders. They were forcing them into that ball back to the goalie because it ended up being the only option available to them. And I mean, credit to Liverpool's defenders as well for dealing with that so incredibly well, because, you know, under that pressure, we've seen players, especially Dejan Lovren, just wilt under that pressure. They've struggled. They've not been able to sort their legs out, and they've given away chances in those kind of situations in the past. But Dejan Lovren, who's massively improved over the course of this season, you know, I and pretty much all Liverpool fans after that game against Spurs at Wembley in October were saying that Dejan Lovren is surely finished at the club. Surely there's no way back in for him in this Liverpool side. But again, Virgil van Dijk is bringing out the best in the guy. And I mean, it goes without saying that Virgil van Dijk was phenomenally cool on the ball in any of those situations where he got put under pressure. But I was really impressed with the way that Dejan Lovren dealt with it. There was one moment in the first half where he gets put under that kind of pressure and doesn't even bother with the pass back. He just kind of jinks the ball out wide a little bit and goes round the Newcastle player as if it's nothing, which is something that would have been completely inconceivable for Dejan Lovren to do just a few months ago, let alone a few years ago. So I thought Liverpool dealt incredibly well with that situation, but Newcastle really were impressive in the way that they pressed and the way that they shut Liverpool down. But again, I never really felt worried. I never really felt like we were in trouble. And if anything, the only thing that was actually stopping us scoring in those early stages of the game was actually the front three, I think. You know, time and time again in those situations, creating has been the problem. It's been the midfield that's let us down. You know, those players in the centre of the park just haven't been able to get the ball through to those attackers that have played so well for Liverpool over the course of this season. But the amount of long balls that are getting played over the top, Emre Can, Oxlade-Chamberlain and Virgil van Dijk were all playing fantastic fantastic balls over the top of that Newcastle defence to Liverpool's forwards. And if it wasn't for the fact that occasionally our forwards, you know, Salah, Mane, Firmino as well, just couldn't sort their feet out in those situations, that was the only reason for me that Liverpool weren't actually scoring earlier on in the game. So it was a bit of a weird one, really, in that it wasn't one of those where you can say, look, their centre-backs are playing really well. It wasn't one of those where you're saying, look, our midfield's underperforming. It was a game that didn't really follow the usual pattern of a game where Liverpool haven't scored early on. And of course, eventually, Liverpool do get the goal before half-time. Again, just something that I wasn't ever really worried about the fact that it wouldn't happen. It just felt like, you know, with the quality of the players like Mo Salah, we were always capable of doing something like that. And again, the creativity for that goal comes from the midfield. Brilliant work from Oxlade-Chamberlain, who was absolutely excellent today. You know, I said in the video after the West Ham game that while a lot of people were saying that he should be man of the match and talking up his performance in that match, I didn't really see it. I struggled to see what had impressed people so much with Oxlade-Chamberlain in that game. But today, I absolutely saw it. You know, he was all over the shop. He was dropping in. There was one moment where he dropped in for Andrew Robertson when he'd gone forward and helped out the defensive effort, which was really, really good to see from a player who really is used to playing attacking midfield, playing that kind of number 10 role that Phil Coutinho used to play for Liverpool. There was that other moment where he played a really good ball forward. I think it was to Trent Alexander-Arnold that just didn't quite work. And it was one of those instances, like I said, where the balls forward were great, but our forwards just weren't sorting their feet out. And then obviously you've got the goal that kicks things off for Liverpool, and it comes from a driving Oxlade-Chamberlain run, kind of similar to what he did against Man City, where he's kind of looked at the space that's available to him, thought, actually, you know what, I'm not going to pass, I'm not going to look for any easy option, I'm actually just going to drive at their defence and see what happens. And instantly it put Newcastle's defenders on the back foot. Suddenly they don't know what to do, and for all the credit that people were trying to give to Newcastle centre-backs, I thought they had a poor game today. They weren't very mobile, they weren't capable of dealing with the speed that Liverpool have in their attack, and that was a perfect example of it, where Oxlade-Chamberlain drives forward, slips the ball into Mo Salah, and it's a nice little finish from Mo, nearly saved by, what's his name, De Bruyne, the Newcastle goalkeeper at the moment, but thankfully it goes in. And again, I mean, I don't want to keep complaining about BT Sport, but they kept talking about Mo Salah as if he was still in this purple patch and still, you know, in a great vein of form. They're saying when a player's in form like that, everything he shoots just goes into the net. But you've got to give credit where credit's due. Mo Salah is a world-class talent, and there is no doubt about that at the moment. And when you're a world-class talent, you put chances away like that. And there was actually a moment earlier on the game where Mo Salah actually didn't score. You know, it ended up being because he was crowded out a little bit. We didn't quite have Newcastle's defence on the back foot in the same way that we did there. But obviously, you can't give Mo Salah two opportunities, especially in that exact same position in the pitch. He didn't waste his chance there, and Liverpool went 1-0 up going in at half-time. And like I said, for all the talk of Liverpool struggling to create goals, and I think surely a lot of Liverpool fans were never worried about that, and we were rewarded for our lack of worry as Liverpool went in 1-0 up. And then the second half, obviously early on in that half, about 10 minutes in the 55th minute or something like that, Sadio Mane puts Liverpool 2-0 up. Another instance where we just put Newcastle's defence on the back foot by charging at them, finding the space. This time it was Roberto Firmino who had a really good game, I thought. You know, while it was the two wingers who scored, Firmino dropped deep so well. People talk about how it's incredible to have a striker who also just occasionally plays CDM, and it's not a bad thing. You know, last season we had Sturridge dropping into the midfield, and it was mainly just because he wanted the ball, and you're thinking, no, we need you forward, we need you helping out the effort. But when Firmino drops deep into that kind of semi-midfield role, it works. He's actually really, really good at it, and it was fantastic to see. The goal actually starts off from Firmino deep inside Liverpool's own half. Well, I mean, not deep inside our half, but with the context of where the game was being played, for our centre forward to be inside our half counts as being very, very far back on the pitch. Firmino gets very far back. I think he wins the ball. He starts the move off. He gets the ball again, charges just like Oxlade-Chamberlain at that Newcastle defence, plays it through to Mane, and it's an absolute rocket from Mane. It's an explosive strike, the kind that we are starting to get a bit more used to seeing now from Sadio Mane, now that he's recovered his form. That is, what is it, 5 goals in 3 games, which is lovely stuff from a player who was having a really, really difficult patch at one point earlier on in the season. So it was a really good strike. Again, you look at those 2 goals and they come from moments where our players have almost lost their balance from the speed that they're going at. You know, when Oxlade-Chamberlain plays that ball into Salah, he's falling over, he's leaning back, and the same happens when Sadio Mane has that shot against Newcastle early on in that second half. It comes from our players, you know, just extending that tiny bit and just making that tiny bit of extra effort that they needed to do. And I think it was just testament to the fact that we had a tiny bit more speed than Newcastle in those situations, and that is thankfully what made it count for Liverpool. And then obviously the rest of the second half, bit of a procession really. Newcastle had the odd chance here and there where they kind of looked like they were threatening to get back into the game. Loris Karius, for me, had a really, really nice game in that obviously he makes that fantastic save right at the end of the first half. The kind of moment where, you know, in the past maybe Liverpool would have conceded there and you're thinking, oh, for God's sake, for all the work that we've put in the first half, we're still going in with the scores level. Thankfully, with a goalie like Loris Karius, that is not the kind of thing that happens. He's capable of dealing with those one-off moments where there's one moment in the match where he just needs to make himself count. He needs to stand up and be counted and make the save that helps Liverpool get the win. He did it there. It's the kind of thing we need our goalies to be doing on a weekly basis, and thankfully, now that Karius is playing week in, week out, he's getting that confidence. He's capable of doing those things for Liverpool, and hopefully, if he carries on doing it between now and the end of the season, he might actually have a future as Liverpool's #1 beyond the end of this season, which would be absolutely great. And then, you know, when Newcastle did have that pressure and they had the odd header, the odd cross into the box that maybe with potentially, you know, not to be mean to him, but with Simon Mignolet in the goal, you might be a little bit worried about what's going to happen. You always felt safe that Loris Karius knew what to do. You know, if Newcastle did get a shot on target, you trusted that the goalie would be able to save it. And that is hugely important for Liverpool and important for the players that play in front of Loris Karius as well. You know, those defenders, if they know that they can rely on their goalie in the few situations when Newcastle actually get a shot on goal, it helps their confidence and it just makes them play so much better as a unit. So yeah, a really good performance from Liverpool, you know. Like I said, for all this talk that we struggled to create chances and we weren't our usual selves in that game, I just thought it was really, really mature, really sensible, managed the game incredibly well and managed the fitness levels incredibly well as well, because obviously, you know, it's very, very cold in England at the moment and that can lead to muscle injuries. Liverpool made sure they had the game wrapped up nice and early on, 2-0, never really went looking for, you know, a kind of rout that we had against West Ham last weekend. We know we've got the game against Porto in midweek. We've obviously got a massive tie against Man United at Old Trafford in a week's time. We don't want any injuries at this stage of the season, and like I said, managed it incredibly well. So just, you know, one of those games where I can't really come away with any complaints whatsoever, to be honest. So that is all for today's video. Thank you guys very, very much for watching. Don't forget to get your questions in for the 5,000 subscriber Q&A show, which will be coming up on this channel in the next week or so or something like that. If you've got a question for me, leave it in the comments below for this video. Apart from that, don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're new around here. Check out some of the other videos that have been out on the channel over the past few days as well. Don't forget to follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter, and I'll be back soon for the pre-match content for the game in the Champions League against Porto. Bye for now.